Hey guys, Courier6 here for the Kaladesh Express, your #1 source for Universes Beyond, and today we're going to be covering the commander, Shaun, Father of Synths. Now normally for these decks, I like to talk about the character in a lot of depth. Like I think the max I've spent like 10 minutes on a specific commander before. Not so this time. It's going to be a relatively short lore section and a normal length deck tech section. And that's not because I didn't have things to say on Shaun, I just think he is complicated. It's not that he's not interesting. Fallout 4 is not that good of a game. I do love Fallout. I love Fallout New Vegas. I love Fallout 1 and 2. Fallout 3 is fine. But Fallout 4 is just not that well written. I'm not trying to throw slander at any other writers. I'm sure they worked very hard, but it's very hard to parse through what they mean when they have characters like Shaun, who's got this very deep, intricate lore. However, it's just kind of written in such a way that it contradicts itself. I'm going to be hitting a lot of the broad strokes for Shaun and not going too deep into the minutia of him, but I hope you'll still enjoy this Shaun lore dump. Appearing in Fallout 4, Shaun is one of the main villains of the game and is the player character's son. Shaun's first appearance is during the opening of Fallout 4. In the opening, we see the player character playing with Shaun, who was a newborn at the time. Playing with Shaun.
Sick! It's black!
Confirmed reports of nuclear detonations in New York and Pennsylvania. My God.
Not too long later, sirens begin to blare in the air, and the family, that being Shaun, the player character, and their spouse, run to the nearest vault, Vault 111, to escape nuclear devastation. Right after arriving at the vault, Shaun, his father, and his mother are put into cryostasis without their knowledge and are frozen for some time. The family is awakened a century and a half later, and the player must watch as their spouse gets murdered, and baby Shaun is kidnapped while the player is locked inside their cryotube. Afterwards, they are promptly put back to sleep for another 60 years. After awaking a second time due to cryopod failure, the player rushes over to their spouse's cryopod, now serving as their coffin.
Come on, come on, come on! Oh, God!
And swears an oath to their now deceased partner they will fight their son.
I'll find who did this, and I'll get Shaun back. I promise.
As the player progresses through the game, they embark on a journey to find Shaun. Along the way, they hear about and eventually encounter operatives of the Institute, a secretive organization of scientists and researchers who are revealed to be Shaun's abductors. When the player character does find Shaun, it is revealed that he is now a 60-year-old man, spent his entire life under the watchful eye of the Institute scientists, become the leader of the Institute, and now goes by the title of
I am Father. Welcome to the Institute.
He's called this because Shaun's pure, never irradiated DNA is the basis of the Institute's greatest creation, the Generation 3 Synth. Depending on the player's choices throughout the game and how they speak to Shaun from this point forward, they may decide to join forces with Shaun and the Institute, or oppose them. The only concrete thing we know about Shaun's ending is that
I have cancer. Lung cancer.
and has decided not to share this information with its highly advanced medical science division, whose technology is something that would make Rick Sanchez blush, resulting in his death, marking the exact moment when Shaun becomes Heisenberg. As the leader of the Institute, and having spent his entire life inside the shady organization, Shaun is one of the most put together mad scientists you'll ever see. But, make no mistake, Shaun is mad. Shaun often displays a lack of empathy for the Commonwealth and sees it as a resource to be exploited rather than a community to be helped. He leads the Institute in conducting morally ambiguous experiments and projects, often at the expense of innocent lives. Some of these experiments involve Shaun going on invasion of the body snatchers on people, using his synths to replace ordinary citizens of the wasteland. This is a major story point for the majority of the first act of the game, and there was never a concrete reason as to why he does this. We can infer that he does it to manipulate the masses by replacing key leaders in rival factions, and he does do that, but he also replaces a lot of completely random folk throughout the game for no apparent reason. This causes paranoia for most major settlements of the Commonwealth, and breeds resentment for his faction by literally everybody else. This is where his ability on his card comes from, by the way. He also occasionally, somehow, just loses track of scientists, synths, and other experiments, and most egregious of all, by the end of the game, he decides to let his parent, who he has not seen in 60 years, and the last time he did see him, he was a baby who may or may not have the intelligence of an R free magic poster, run his doomsday weapon of a faction because, I don't know, nepotism I guess? Under his leadership, the Institute creates dangerous technologies without regard for the consequences, and I think this card captures that perfectly. He makes synthetic clones of people, sends them out for no apparent rhyme or reason, and I honestly think that's kind of cool. I think I've pretty definitively captured who Shaun is, and if anyone in the comments wants to tell me how I misunderstand this character and he's way deeper dude and, you know, his motivations make all the sense, please explain it to me, because I have played this game for the most hours, and I've done many Institute runs, and boy howdy, let me tell you, the Institute makes no sense as a faction, and Shaun is hilarious. You know, I really considered buying a lab coat for this video, but I thought better of it. So Shaun's one wacky boy, huh? I hope you enjoyed that lore dump on Shaun. We're gonna go into the deck tech now. I just want to say the focus of this deck is not specifically to be the most powerful Izzet deck there ever was. It's to make clones take advantage of attack triggers. So we're just trying to have fun here. This is my budget deck, so enjoy this, all right? Alright Wastelanders, let's start with our commander, Shaun, Father of Synths. This is a 3/4 legendary creature, human scientist for 3, a blue and a red, and he says whenever you attack, you may create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of target attacking legendary creature you control other than Shaun, except it's not legendary and it's a synth artifact creature in addition to its other types. When Shaun leaves the battlefield, exile all synth tokens you control. So what this card really says is we're going to shove a bunch of legendary creatures in here, attack with them, make a bunch of copies, and overwhelm our opponent with card advantage. To be as efficient as possible with our cards, our legendary creatures are going to fall into a few categories. That's going to be artifact synergy, combat synergy, legend synergy, and token/copy synergy. We're also running a couple other categories, but we'll get to them in due time. Let's start with the artifact synergy. In this category, we've got Nick Valentine, Private Eye, Akal Pakal, First Among Equals, Captain Storm, Cosmium Raider, Enthusiastic Mechanaut, and Urza, Lord High Artificer. Clearly the all-star for this category is going to end up being Urza, but I want to talk about Captain Storm real quick. While we do run like one other pirate in this deck, I think, this deck isn't a pirate-themed deck, but I think Captain Storm is a pretty emblematic card when we're focusing on our game strategy here, and that's to have cards that would, if they had another version of themselves, synchronize very well with themselves. With that in mind, let's jump into our next category, which is going to be combat. In this category, we have Karn the Betrayer, Rose, Cutthroat Raider, Brutaclad, Techlore Engineer, Thassa, God of the Sea, Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator, hey there's a pirate, Sword of Feast and Famine, Run for Your Life, Aomar, Marshal of Rohan, I'm sure I said that wrong, Bilbo, Retired Burglar, Veronica, Dissident Scribe, Danny Pink, and Edie, Lonesome Eyebot. And the all-star for this category is going to be Danny Pink, and I am so glad I picked up like 7 copies of this before it spiked up recently. This card is an absolute house, and I've always wondered why it was so cheap. It buffs up our creatures, and it's card advantage. It's also a legendary creature, which is great for our deck, but honestly just a fantastic card. And definitely check your bulk, because this card was like $1 up until recently. Our next category is a very small category, and that's Legendary Synergy. We have 3 cards, and the first one is K9 Mark 1. The second is Gimli of the Glittering Caves. The third is Mirror Box. The card from this category I want to talk about is Mirror Box, which seems like it might be a non-butt with our deck, but actually ends up being really good. First of all, it buffs all legendary creatures just flat out. Second is we'll occasionally be making like regular like copy tokens and not synth tokens with our deck, so that is going to be useful. And the third reason is it's going to end up being a almost like a coat of arms card for us, because our legendary creature copies are still going to maintain the names of the card, even if they don't maintain the legendary status. And that's going to end up with us having really big creatures for a very low mana investment. And speaking of token copies, our next category is going to be token copy synergies. And that starts off with Saheeli, Sun's Brilliance, and continues on with Mechanized Production, Quantum Misalignment, Sea Double, Felden of the Third Path, and Helm of the Host. I've actually got two cards from this category I want to talk about, and the first one's going to be Mechanized Production, which is a token doubler and also a win con for us, which is nice. And the second card is going to be Helm of the Host, which is basically doubling our commander's ability, which is really cool. Also with this card, we don't necessarily have to make Synths, so if our commander gets killed, we don't lose all our copy tokens. Alright, next category we got is the cards I didn't know where to put, but definitely should be in the deck. That's Utility, and it starts off with Swiftfoot Boots and continues on with Ill-Timed Explosion, Red Death, Shipwrecker, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Headliner Scarlet, Unexpected Windfall, Adric, Mathematical Genius, and the Peregrine Dynamo. This is the utility category, and all the cards kind of are doing different things, but the card I want to focus on is Adric, Mathematical Genius from the Doctor Who set. I really like that it doubles our commander's abilities, which is going to be pretty useful. And it also doubles as a Stifle, which is really useful. I genuinely believe Stifle effects are underplayed in Commander. Our second to last category is Interaction, and we've got quite a bit of it. I could see someone wanting to cut some of these cards down to add more legendary creatures, but I feel like this deck could use a lot of interaction because it might be kind of slow to get started. Anyway, let's get started with Mana Leak, Muddle the Mixture, Pyroblast, An Offer You Can't Refuse, Reverse the Polarity, Is It Charm, Chaos Warp, Play with Fire, Scalding Viper, Venzer, Shaper Savant, Electrosiphon, Quench, Spell Pierce, and a Braid. Notice I did not say Counterspell in that list, and that's because I'm really dumb. Replace Play with Fire with Counterspell if you want. Our last category is going to be Ramp, and we have quite a bit of it, so let's get started. Soul Ring, Gloin, Dwarf Emissary, I am absolutely certain I said that name wrong. The RMS Titanic. The RMS Titanic. Glittering Stockpile. Silvermere. Captain Lannery Storm. Talisman of Creativity. Arcane Signet. Solemn Simulacrum. Izzet Signet. Mind Stone. Strength Bobblehead. Wayfarer's Bauble. And Intelligence Bobblehead. Normally I skip lands but bring up any very specific lands that are going to be in the deck, but this one's kind of budget, so all the lands in the deck are just what I had. If you've got expensive duels, throw them in the deck and have fun. As always, Moxfield link in the description. Oh yeah, and before I go, I just want to make it clear, I do know that these cards exist and they are very useful for this kind of deck, you know, especially when we're worried about losing all our tokens to board wipes or just our commander getting flickered. However, that's not fun, so you know, this is the first deck in a while for this channel that I made in paper. I really dig Shaun. I think this is like one of the coolest commanders that came out with the Universes Beyond Fallout set. Like, not my favorite character by far, but I just think his design is super cool. It also forced me to replay large chunks of Fallout 4, so I guess there's that. Honestly, Fallout 4 is not that bad. I did just rip into it a little bit in the section prior, but you know, like, Fallout 4 is fine. It's a lot of fun to play, I will say that. This is also the only deck tech so far that I have been drinking while working on the majority of it, so I hope it wasn't too wacky. And I hope you enjoyed this Fallout deck tech for Shaun, Father of Synths. I'll be back next week to do Marcus, probably. I'm also going to be working on a follow-up to that Fade Dalton video if Wizards announces like a statement on what they're going to do about it, so keep an eye out for both of those. Otherwise, I'm Courier 6 of the Kaladesh Express, and I hope you have a great day. Salut, mi familia.